This is not just another talk about toxic relationships. This is for the person who keeps asking, why do I feel drained after every family gathering? Why do certain coworkers quietly undermine me? Why do I become weaker around people who are supposed to love me? Most people believe their greatest enemies are strangers. But psychology teaches something far more unsettling. The deepest wounds are usually delivered by people standing closest to us. Not because they are always evil, but because proximity creates emotional access. And once someone has emotional access to you, they no longer need to attack openly. A look, a comparison, a dismissive comment, silence at the right moment. These become enough to destabilize your confidence. Ancient Tibetan philosophy once warned, after death, the person confronts the illusions created by their own mind. Applied to modern relationships, the message becomes chillingly relevant. We do not suffer only from what people do to us. We suffer from the meaning our minds attach to those actions. That is why two people can experience the exact same criticism, yet one collapses emotionally while the other remains calm. The event is identical. The internal structure is different. And this is the core truth most people never learn. Your life is shaped less by external attacks and more by your internal reaction system. Many people spend years trying to change difficult people. They try to explain themselves, defend themselves, earn approval, win understanding. But the tragedy is this: the more emotionally invested you become in being understood, the more control you hand over to others, especially to people driven by envy, insecurity, or silent competition. These individuals rarely attack directly. Instead, they create doubt. They drain momentum. They make you emotionally reactive. They subtly interrupt your growth. And the worst part? If you confront them emotionally, you often end up looking like the unstable one, because indirect aggression leaves almost no evidence. This is why, emotionally, intelligent people eventually discover a painful rule of life. Not every battle is meant to be fought directly. Some battles are won through distance. Now here is where most people make a fatal mistake. They believe, if I work harder, they will finally appreciate me. But psychologically, success often intensifies hidden hostility, because your growth becomes a mirror reflecting another person's insecurity. Your progress reminds them of what they avoided, delayed, or failed to become. So instead of celebrating your rise, they unconsciously try to slow it down. Not always through hatred. Sometimes through sarcasm. Sometimes through guilt. Sometimes through concern. This is why highly ambitious people often feel emotionally exhausted around certain family members, friends, or colleagues. The issue is not simply conflict. The issue is energy erosion. And once you understand that, your strategy must change completely. The goal is no longer, how do I make them understand me? The new question becomes, how do I stop giving them psychological control over my nervous system? That changes everything, because emotionally reactive people are easy to manipulate, but emotionally regulated people become difficult to destabilize. This is why one of the strongest psychological skills is what I call strategic distance. Strategic distance does not always mean cutting people off completely. Sometimes it means revealing less, explaining less, reacting less, expecting less. In the workplace, this means documenting more and emotionalizing less. Do not overshare your ambitions. Do not announce every plan. Quietly build results, because results speak a language envy cannot easily interrupt. In family relationships, strategic distance means abandoning the fantasy that everyone will eventually understand your path. Some people never will. And accepting that reality is emotionally liberating. You stop performing for approval. You stop negotiating your identity. You stop shrinking yourself to preserve comfort. Among friends, the principle becomes even simpler. Ask yourself one brutal question. Does my energy expand around this person or contract? Your future is heavily influenced by the emotional environments you repeatedly enter. People underestimate this, but psychology repeatedly confirms. Human beings unconsciously adapt to the emotional standards around them. If you stay around chronic negativity, You slowly normalize self-doubt. If you stay around growth-oriented people, your standards rise naturally. This is why protecting your mind is not selfish. It is strategic survival. Now let us discuss the most important battlefield of all, your interpretation system. Most emotional suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the meaning attached to them. For example, a coworker excludes you from information. One person thinks, they hate me. Another thinks, this is inefficient. I need a better system. Same event, different interpretation, different emotional outcome. This is the dividing line between emotionally fragile people and psychologically resilient people. Fragile people personalize everything. Resilient people analyze patterns. That is why mentally strong individuals are not emotionless. They simply refuse to let emotions become authorities. They separate feelings from facts, reactions from decisions, noise from data. And once you learn this, your entire life changes. Criticism becomes information. Jealousy becomes confirmation of movement. Rejection becomes redirection. You stop asking, why are they doing this to me? And you begin asking, what structure allows this pattern to keep repeating? That question gives you power. Because victims focus on incidents. Powerful people focus on systems. And ultimately, this is the great psychological divide between people who remain stuck and people who rise. The people who remain trapped spend their lives reacting emotionally. The people who rise redesign their internal structure. They no longer chase validation. They no longer explain themselves endlessly. They no longer hand emotional control to unstable environments. Instead, they become internally anchored. And here is the final truth I want you to remember. The strongest person in the room is not the loudest one. It is the person who cannot easily be emotionally controlled. The ancient Tibetan teachings said, the awakened person no longer fears the illusion. In modern psychological language, we could translate that this way. Once you understand the structure, you stop being shaken by the performance. So if you are surrounded by envy, manipulation, silent hostility, or emotional exhaustion, remember this. Your goal is not to win every relationship. Your goal is to stop losing yourself inside them. And once that happens, something remarkable begins. You stop surviving emotionally, and you finally begin advancing strategically. If this lecture gave you a new perspective on human behavior, psychology, and emotional resilience, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who needs it. Because sometimes the most dangerous battles are the invisible ones.